Howdy to all. It's nice to be with you. And let me start my sharing my screen and we'll kick this off. All right. Okay, so I have just returned from a very fun and I'd say exhausting experience last week. So I did a 5-day charity mountain bike ride, and we rode from the capital of Australia, which is Canberra. There's Parliament House right there in behind us, and then we rode all the way up to the very top of Australia, literally the top of the world locally. And it's called Mount Kosciuszko. And by some parts of the world's standards, it's not really that mountainous, but still, when you're on a bike and you're having to pedal your legs, it was very much so. So anyway, I did this 5-day bike ride. It was called Ride for Rescue with a group of other people, and it was just totally awesome. It was a really great experience. But over the course of the week, I was expecting to see some incredible sights. But what took me by a little bit of surprise was that I had these moments of what I would call awe, right? Awe. And awe has been perceived or has been described as perceived vastness. And I love this little expression of this little tacker here. It's just like it's wide-eyed. Wow, there's a lot going on right at the moment. And these times, there were three distinct occasions. Actually, there were more than that. So it was actually a very awesome week away. But there were certainly some pivotal times, some real key times, which actually just felt really quite awestruck. Right? And another word for this is transcendence. Anyway, here's the first one. So the first one was that we rode up a mountain and we kept riding up a mountain and riding and riding and riding and riding. And eventually you get to the top, and as you crested it, you came around a bend and we were right up on this high road, and it was inaccessible to most vehicles. And we're up there, and as you look down, you could actually see this huge network of lakes down below, and you were elevated and the sun was shining. And I remember just standing there, and you have that moment of sort of almost rocking backwards and forwards a bit as your eyes are adjusting to the vastness of this, to the magnitude of it. And just for that moment, I just wanted to stand there and just to be quiet, almost respectful, I think, and just to soak it all in. It was an awe-inspiring moment. And truth be told, over the course of the week, I had several of them. That was the most prominent for me, but I had those moments where I just went, wow, look at this, look at this. There was that vastness, that perceived vastness. But then I actually had this similar experience, these awe moments, these transcendent moments in different formats as well, quite unexpected. So one particular evening, and it was the end of day 4, and each day we were doing a lot of kilometers, more than I had prepared for, and a lot more uphill than I prepared for. So it was actually really tiring, and it was hot conditions too. But anyway, day 4, I was actually really feeling the effects, and I went to bed very early, and I lay in my bed and I had some ear plugs in, just my earphones, because I was anticipating that someone else in the room was probably going to be snoring, and that would help me sleep. But I thought, oh, I'll put some music on. And for some reason, I felt compelled to listen to music that my parents used to play when I was just a little young fella. And it was actually Elvis, Elvis Presley, the king, Elvis Presley's gospel album. Right? And this one album that they used to play over and over again. And I lay there and I was listening to this music, and I just got caught up in it. And as I was lying there, feeling quite physically exhausted, I literally felt elevated. I felt lifted. I was having this moment of just awe. I don't know how other than to describe that. And it's really actually challenging to put words around what that experience is like. But it was transcendent. Yeah, I was elevated to something bigger than myself. That's another way that they sometimes refer to these transcendent moments or these awe moments. So that was the second time. And then the third time, intriguingly enough, was coming home on the bus. And we were driving home on the bus, and there were a couple of people sitting. One was behind me, and one was in front. We had our own seats, and we started chatting, and we started talking about things that were noble, about living life well, and and taking this deeper dive into these sorts of sort of higher order living. I think if I don't know, even know how to articulate that. But what I found is that talking about these things with community, with friends, with like-minded people, I really felt lifted by it. I felt elevated. And I came away from the discussion feeling compelled to be a better person. Like I don't know what it was, but once again, it was awe-inspiring. It was transcendent. And I'm intrigued by this whole idea of awe, having moments of awe, awesome moments, transcendent moments where we get lifted, to higher. And what we know is from a wellbeing perspective is that there's actually huge value in that. In fact, there's even studies that show that when people who experience more of these awe moments, they demonstrate more pro-social behavior. So they're actually, sort of nicer people to hang out with and intriguing. And they've tried to figure out, what's going on there. It might be to do with the fact that we do feel something, part of something a lot more vast than us, bigger than us, and that we're actually a relatively small part in it. So we actually know that it reduces sort of egocentric ways. I find this really, really intriguing, and there are many other benefits. What we definitely know is that moments of awe and moments of transcendence actually are deeply meaningful for people. So actually, people come away from them describing that their life feels more meaningful, which is so intriguing because often in these awe moments we feel very small, and yet they're deeply meaningful, and possibly because it is in these moments that we feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. Neil Armstrong famously has the quote where he said that coming back from the moon, he looked at this tiny blue pea in the very distance, and he said, and I held my hand out, and if I closed one eye, I could blot out the entire Earth, the entire planet with my thumb. And he said, but it didn't make me feel like a giant. I felt very, very small. And yet this was a deeply meaningful moment for him, an awe-inspiring, transcendent moment. And so I'm wondering about awe. I'm wondering about awe and the extent to which you experience it. And what we know is that there are many pathways, and people experience this awe or transcendence in different ways. Certainly, nature is a very powerful pathway for it. And I like this little analogy here, but what these transcendent, these awe-inspiring moments do, they actually lift us out of the trees to see the big picture, and so that we can actually we see the forest instead. And this is part of the reason why we think that it gives people perspective, which is another hugely valuable thing. So through nature is an awe-inspiring medium, as are the arts. And look, I don't claim to be highly artistic, but there are some works of art that I look at and they captivate me. They stop me for a moment. For some, it might be in the musical arts, as I described with one of my experiences. But certainly the art seems to be another pathway through which we envelop and experience these awe-inspiring moments. As are stories of moral elevation. If you think about 9/11, you think about some of these stories where people have acted courageously, often sacrificially. And there's something within us that says that that's good, that's incredibly, profoundly good and powerful. And when we hear stories like that, when we read about them, when we watch them, when we learn about them, we feel awestruck by it. We feel lifted by it, right? Where, as I think I used the words earlier, you feel called to be a better person yourself, right? These are awe-inspiring moments. And then, of course, there's through certain spiritual practice, through prayer and meditation. Different people find these spiritual practice can be pathways to these sort of moments of awe. And of course, this is not all of them. There are other ways too. And so I'd love to reflect on that and ask you the question this. First of all, when was the last time that you experienced a moment of awe or transcendence, where you felt elevated, lifted to something bigger than yourself? Secondly, what are your most prominent pathways for experiencing moments of transcendence and awe? And, I know for me personally, nature is incredibly powerful. Like particularly if I'll go have certain spots where I go, if I'm surfing certain times of day, there's something about that that's very connecting that just elevates me. And I come away different, good different from that particular experience. And then the third question, how could you discover, and perhaps given the answer to number two might be a good way of reflecting on this, but how could you discover this month some moments of awe? Because we certainly know there's huge value in doing that.